Thank you. Steph said to wait, so I've been waiting, but
Now that Elliot's here, we can start.
Well,
I was really waiting for Elliot.
That's right. Well, I was asked to start the session. Dorian was asked to start the session. And, sorry, I just introduced it. Sorry.
Well, Elliot's been rehearsing all morning. I saw him.
That's right. That's right. So, welcome everybody on this magnificent conference. It's wonderful to see some of you looking bright and shiny, and some of you looking like you've been having a great time. Isn't that wonderful? Sorry. Norm is going to open today's proceedings. Norm is the technical director of GemStone, the best database in the world, and Norm will be talking about the status of GemStone in 2016.
Thank you. That was worth waiting for. So, last year in Brescia, after my talk, Steph took me aside and made a couple of suggestions. So what you're going to see today is a result of two of those suggestions. One of which was say something about what GemStone is for people that don't know, which I think is a very good idea. So I have a few slides on that. And the other one was, I forget how he put it, but it was to the effect of liven it up a little. But I don't think those are his words. This was a year ago, and there was wine involved, so I couldn't swear to his exact, but that was the gist. So now we have with jokes. So not many, because I still have some, things to talk about that they're paying me to say, but a few. So with that. Oh, the other thing I did is I decided I would use every slide transition available in PowerPoint.
Sweet.
And I got them all in and reused a couple, so.
So pay attention.
So
You do
again,
again because I missed it. I didn't realize I was supposed to be looking for it.
no. We start small and we build it.
Sounds like a bingo card.
Wait for slide 24. So, as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about what GemStone is, very basic. James had a session on that yesterday that was more comprehensive than what I'll talk about, but I borrowed a couple of his slides. Then I'll talk about version 3.3, which is our current version, and what we're working on for 3.4. Our licensing options at the end, and then we'll take questions. First joke. How can you tell an extroverted programmer from an introverted programmer?
He stares at your shoes.
Oh, Arden's heard this one. An extroverted programmer looks at your shoes when he talks to you. And then we have the requisite Dilbert on XP. How many people here have actually done XP? Okay, so most people should get this. User stories are always the challenge, aren't they?
Yes. This is good, Norm.
Wait till I get going. How many people have a good feel for what GemStone is? I mean, conceptually, at least. Okay, good number. How many people have actually used GemStone and written any code in it? Also a good number. Okay, very good. So maybe this will be review for most of you. So what is this GemStone thing you speak of? Well, GemStone was designed to mainly address the original limitations of what we call traditional Smalltalk, where you have an image and one user behind one image kind of thing. And those limitations were, you're limited to one VM, and there are, of course, other solutions to this, like DST and other things, but traditionally one VM, one host, you're limited to RAM because the image is in memory, And the changes are what you have since your last save of the image. So I know there are exceptions to all these, but traditionally that's kind of the way it's been. So with GemStone, we wanted to eliminate all 4 of those traditional limitations. So we have an object space where you can have thousands of EMs, and there are people that actually do this. The object space is limited by disk instead of RAM. Saves and persistence are managed by ACID transactions. And the changes are guaranteed persistent once committed. So once it's in the transaction log, it's there, similar to the way a database works. Scalability is another thing. You can have billions and billions of objects in GemStone, thousands of users, thousands of hosts, thousands of transactions per second, terabytes of data. And again, there are people doing this in production. Concurrency, instead of the one user to one image design, you can have multiple users, like we said, thousands. You have built-in transactions to the system. Concurrency, both pessimistic and optimistic concurrency, where pessimistic is object level locking, and optimistic is hoping conflicts don't occur, and if they do, dealing with them as they come up, as well as shared and private namespaces. Also, we have security, of course, object level security, so fine-grained down to the object level with user group and world permissions. You have to log into GemStone like you'd log into a database, so the traditional is the user ID and password, where the password's maintained in GemStone. Coming in the next release, we're going to support single sign-on with Kerberos and GSS API. We also have authentication with LDAP and going up to PAM. And we're kind of expanding this every couple of releases. So you don't have to keep your password in GemStone anymore. You can rely on some other corporate server or something to manage the credentials for you. And then we also have privileged operations that are built into GemStone, garbage collection, password change, things like that. GemStone is still, of course, 100% Smallalk, all objects all the time. ANSI compliant mostly. There are some exceptions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a question on the previous slides.
On the previous slide.
Yeah, so
Okay,
garbage
we'll get to see this twice.
garbage collector, garbage collection, so like, what does it mean with the administrative privilege?
Well, running global garbage collection in GemStone is a privileged operation, so not just any user can start it, because it can affect performance of the repository. So you have to have the garbage collection privilege in order to do garbage collection administrative tasks. Now that doesn't mean within the VM. Individual VM garbage collection happens automatically. We're talking about global garbage collection across the entire shared repository of objects. So again, 100% Smallalk, all objects all the time, what you're used to, mostly ANSI compliant. And support for very large collections. Again, millions and millions of objects in collection with indexes, both based on equality, where you're effectively searching on an equal compare, or identity on a identity of an object or double equal compare. There's nothing like keeping people engaged to see what the next slide transition is.
Are you doing translate?
That's pulling the sheet off.
Okay.
Did you miss that, Suzanne? I can do it again.
Would you do please? Ooh.
Is that the pimple or is it the pimple?
It's whatever PowerPoint does. GemStone also talks to other Smallalks, as you may be aware, with a product called GemBuilder for Smallalk. We support both VisualWorks and VA Smallalk. There's some Pharaoh projects in the open source community to have talk to Pharaoh, Toad being one of the main ones, but I think there's a few others. We also talked other languages. There are C and C++ bindings where you can call out to your own C primitives, or you can have an entire program written in C or C++ that talks to GemStone. There's a GBJ or GemBuilder for Java interface for Java clients. And we also can push data out to Oracle and Sybase. A lot of customers do this. Next joke. I remember a few years ago there was a talk, Agile or Fragile, at, I think it was Stick, not Eastside. I think it was Scott Henry who gave it, if I remember right. Gets even better.
Stop.
Okay, GemStone versions. The current release we have is 3.3.1, and the next one we're working on, the next major release, is 3.4. We're thinking probably the springtime of next year to release that. So I'll go through first what's new in 3.3, and then I'll talk some about what's coming in 3.4. 3.3, we worked on Smallalk VM performance, especially in the integer math department. Got probably 25% improvement on average over the 3.2 line.
Learn something.
I didn't notice it be so popular. Faster transmog restore. So we did some multi-threading improvements in there, about a 30% improvement in restore from transaction logs, and with hot standby systems where we replay live tran logs to update a hot standby database. We have a new immediate class called small fraction. This is another class where the value is encoded in the object ID, so it never takes up disk space or requires a disk read to access it. And there's the numerator denominator ranges there, which encompass a lot of fractions. So the idea is you can take your fraction instance, which is currently a disk object, and replace it with small fraction, and it's expected to be faster.
Do you have information on the relative populations? Because I think floats would be more frequent than fractions, but maybe in financial.
Well, floats probably are. We did, I think, in the previous release, a class called small double, where we have the small double as an immediate instead of float. Performance metrics are hard to come by and hard to back up. Anecdotally, we see somewhere between 10%, and some people have said they don't see any difference with the small fraction. Which, if it's already in memory and you're doing the same math underlying, then you might expect that. So.
Well, my experience was that the instantiation is significant, so even though it's difficult
Right.
to pack these things compared to small integer.
Right. Well, I'm thinking more once you have the objects. Once they're instantiated, you're just accessing them. But yeah, that makes sense.
But in most smaller programs, there's much more people that are doing math, they're doing more float than. And with their financial, it would be a fixed point, so it's kind of interesting which ones you choose.
Well, this feature came from, I think, customer request, right?
Yes.
You had a customer that had a lot of fractions floating around in the database, and it's like, okay, we'll make small fractions, it makes sense, so.
Yeah, we see a lot of both, really. A lot of fractions and a lot of floats with our financial customers. GS file, we are constantly adding things to this class, and it needs to be refactored. More on that later. But we've added some UTF-8 support, and 3 releases ago we added gzip support to this class, and it's getting to be a bit onerous. So I'm going to talk in a few slides down about what we're thinking about doing with that. We added LZ4 data compression support in 3.3, and for those that are not familiar with it, it's a very fast compression scheme. It's open source, it's out on GitHub, and we're seeing times between 10 and 20 times faster than gzip depending on the operation. It doesn't compress quite as well as gzip, but in our view, in our experience, the performance gain is well worth what you lose in the compression size. So in 3.3, all of our network compression, when you turn on compression, and there's a few options to do that, you're getting LZ4 now instead of gzip. So again, we have added LZ4 support to all of our network compression, pretty much across the board in 3.3. We're also adding more encryption options. This is being demanded by our customers between the various network peers in a GemStone architecture. The latest one we did is between the remote gem on a remote cache and the page server slave process on the Stone machine. You can now turn on so you get encryption across that channel. Right now it's anonymous encryption using Diffie-Hellman elliptic curve. We may add certificate support for that later if there's a demand for it. There's already been a couple of questions about it. We added the ability to start stat monitor or our statistics monitor automatically when the Stone begins in 3.3. This is a very common pattern for our customers, is that they start the database and bring up the users and bring up the system, but they forgot to start the statistics monitor. So when something bad happens and we say send us a stat monitor file, it's like, oh, we didn't do it. So, and usually it's not by intention, it's not part of the script, or they just forgot. So now you can set it in the config file the way you want it with the statmon options, and the Stone will take care of it when it comes up automatically. You missed that one, Suzanne.
Social media is messing with your presentation.
She's just posted you to Facebook.
Everywhere.
In 3.3, we've made the page audit command multi-threaded. So that's an offline operation to audit the repository at a page level, and it's about 20 times faster than 3.2. We also built this object canonicalization framework with a customer for canonicalizing frequently used objects. It's not an absolute canonicalization, it's a very close one. It doesn't keep things guaranteed canonical like symbol does. In GemStone 64, it's impossible to have a duplicate symbol. And there are great lengths we go to make sure that doesn't happen. This is probably the 99% solution. So you might get out of a million objects 1 or 2 duplicates, but you really shouldn't see them very much.
But that means you can't rely on equals, but you do get the
Correct.
space saving.
Correct. You get the space saving and the object saving and all those things. And there are ways to reconcile it as well. So you can check for duplicates and fix them kind of after the fact. But it turns out to actually do an absolute canonicalization is fairly expensive and hard. And what we decided with the customer was it wasn't worth the penalty it costs to do that, to get that extra 1% of cases where you might have a duplicate. So this is in the product, and there is code built using this. If you're interested, you can contact us and we can share it. Page server changes. This was an architecture change done for a customer case where traditionally we had one slave page server process per remote session, one-to-one process. And that's all fine until you get 3,000 or 4,000 of these things or more on the database server. And it turns out on Linux especially, a process has a lot more overhead than a thread does. Where you see that as something called page table memory. So in 3.3 we redesigned that so that for a given remote host we now have one thread per remote session instead of one process. So this is the 3.2 design where you have one gem and then one full heavy process on the right side, the page server. And in 3.3, we have one process with a bunch of different threads that take care of each session. And there's quite a big memory saving on this, at the system level, when you have thousands of these things running. We also added the ability to do cache warming with mid caches in 3.3. Cache warming is where you want to heat up your shared memory segment with all the data before you bring your users online for performance reasons. So get the cache hot. And with some of the cloud architectures we're seeing now, there wasn't really a way to do this. So this is the typical design in a cloud environment where you have, say, the Stone server over on the right side, and then you have out in the data center, maybe an EC2 or something, a bunch of remote caches and sessions going across a relatively slow connection over a WAN. And the idea here is you give the sessions an extra place to look for objects and pages before they have to go back across the WAN. So when you bring up these leaf caches, you'd like to be able to warn them from the mid cache as much as possible, not repeatedly suck all the objects across the wire multiple times. So we added the ability to do this in 3.3. Next, Joe. This was not that funny, but it says object-oriented, so I had to. There is no Dilbert script that mentions the word Smallalk as far as I can tell. If you find one, let me know. We have been playing around with GemBuilder for Android as kind of a skunkworks project. One of the guys has it working to be able to log into a GemStone database from his phone. More of an interesting project right now. No one's really using it, but if you want to get your hands on the code, it's out there. So he logged in and he said, show me the sessions we have, and kind of proved that it works. And this is where you can get the code, and this is the engineer doing that if you're interested at all. VSD is our visual stat display tool that is used for displaying and analyzing database statistics. We've been working on this tool as well. We've improved the load time dramatically on Windows for loading large files. We've added a new column, the second column there called end time. It shows you when a process ended. And we've added secondary sort columns to it as well. So the primary sort key is the down arrow, which in this example is end time. And the secondary sort key, whereas you have the same end time, it'll sort to is the process ID, and that's shown in italics. And this is available now. It ships with the server, but we consider it a separate installation. So you can download this from our website anytime, and it'll work with any version of GemStone. The platforms we support, Linux, Apple, both kinds of Solaris, AMD 64 and Spark, and IBM AIX on PowerPC. This is for the database server itself. For the clients, you can have pretty much any client that the client Smalltalk runs on. So Windows, Linux, Solaris, Spark, and Windows for VA Smalltalk. And we now do support VisualWorks 8. It took us a while to get there because there were some pretty big changes under the hood, but we're there now. And we support 8.1.1 and hope to keep up with the version 8 releases as they come out.
Norm, if you back up, what of those who are buying new machines? Is there any AIX PowerPC 64-bit machines or are they all ancient legacy machines? Or
No, we have customers that are actually upgrading PowerPC Power 6 to Power 8. 2 or 3 big customers actually. It's not our biggest in platform, but the customers that do use it tend to be enterprise customers with a lot of sessions and a lot of objects. So it's still going.
And the Oracle Spark?
Yeah, the Oracle Spark stuff is mostly dead at this point. There's not too many customers left on that. We only have one customer using Oracle on AMD 64, but it's a favorite platform of developers because the debugging facilities are so good on it between that and Linux. So we like to build it for ourselves and do a lot of testing on it because we find timing bugs on it that we don't find on Linux. And it's a relatively inexpensive, easy platform to maintain. But the Oracle Spark stuff is, it's funny, 10 years ago that was probably our most common platform, and now it's our least common. So I'll talk now about what we're doing in 3.4, some of the things we're planning, more LZ4 support. We're going to add that to Stat Monitor, BSD. You'll be able to do copying of extent files and tran logs with LZ4 compression if you want. We're still supporting gzip, so this isn't a replacement, it's an addition to gzip compression. And we're going to add Smalltalk access for this, but there's some design going on right now on how we're actually going to do that. We think GS file has kind of grown into this monstrosity class that needs to be refactored. There is talk of porting the file system class over to GemStone or some portion of it in order to support LZ4 and other things. That is in the design stages right now, but we're hoping to get that in 3.4. Also, encryption is becoming more and more of an issue. Customers want to be able to encrypt their backups and tran logs and just about anything, and not just encrypt it, also sign it to prove that it hasn't been messed with. So we're looking at doing that. This is also in the design stages right now. We're having a dialogue with a few different customers on kind of how to do this. But the ultimate would be, you can tell the system to do a backup and it'll automatically compress it, encrypt it, and sign it in one operation. So you ended up with this signed file that you can prove later on that no one has tampered with. We are going to open SSL 1.1 at some point. It's still in beta right now, and we as a rule don't like to put beta software in a release, but the timing will probably be such that OpenSSL goes GA before we do, so at that point we will probably merge it in. There are a lot of changes in 1.1. If you heard Seth's talk yesterday, it's extensive, so we're going to have to refactor a little bit of our code to do that. But that's the direction we're going. We always try to stay on the latest OpenSSL supported release, and we are now, which I think is 102J or something like that. We've got the find reference paths methods now multi-threaded. In 3.4 this is already working, and that's where you start with some object at the bottom of an object tree and say, show me all the ways this is reachable from the set of root objects. And customers use this to say, okay, well I thought I deleted this order, but I ran the garbage collection, it didn't go away, why is it still here? And when you have billions and billions of objects, that can be a hard question to answer. The new way of doing it is multi-threaded and very, very fast for answering that question. So we're pretty excited about that, and we got some customers that are chomping at the bit to get this because they have objects that have been around for years and they can't figure out why they're there. We're going to put some Git support in the base image, I think Dale said.
It's got to happen.
Not quite sure what that's going to look like yet, but there's a placeholder in here for that, so probably Dale's doing a talk this afternoon. Single sign-on support is there now and is working for the most part. So the idea here is that you can use your operating system credentials to sign into GemStone, so you don't have to retype your password. And on the Unix side, we're using GSS API and Kerberos to do that. On the Windows side, Windows calls GSS API SSPI, which is the same but different, the Microsoft way of doing things. But they're supposed to interoperate. I think it's called something else in PowerPoint. So a brief example of how to set this up, and we really tried to make this as easy as possible. So you create a user in the database as you always do, add new user with ID, and then you create something called a Kerberos principal. And the purpose of that object is to map the operating system name or the Kerberos principal name, what your credentials are in the OS level, to your database name, which may or may not be the same. But you have to have some kind of mapping there. So you create this Kerberos principal object and you say, use this user profile for it that I just created, and then you enable single sign-on authentication with it, and you commit your transaction. From the Smallalk side, that's all you need to do. You have to give the sessions access to something called a key tab, which is an encrypted bunch of keys that the Kerberos administrator generates from Kerberos. That's for authenticating the service, and our service name is GemStone 64, is allowed for this user. So you stick this configuration option at the end of your configuration file, and generally it's common, and it's usually read-only. And this tells the gem where to get the keys from. And then you need to get this is the Unix Kerberos example, you need to get a ticket, Kerberos ticket, and if your system uses Kerberos to authenticate, you already have one when you log in. If your system doesn't use Kerberos to authenticate, then you type K in it to get one, it'll ask for your password, and this is the only time it'll ask for it. So you do K in it, and you type your password, and then you do K-list, and here's my ticket. So I've got a ticket now that expires sometimes later, and it's some encrypted file stuck out in the file system that Kerberos knows what it means. And then once I have that, this is kind of hard to see, but basically all I do is bring up Topaz, which is our command line interface, and set my user ID to be normg. Don't give a password and just type login and it works. I think this is the last one. I thought green had the most RAM. Our licensing models are the same as they've ever been. We have perpetual license, you can buy it once, own it forever. Just pay us maintenance fees to get the new releases and support. Annual subscription, pay as you go, cancel any time, and we also have VARs, which are people, value-added resellers that build GemStone into their products, kind of on their stack. This is the new license community edition model we did a couple years ago. It hasn't changed, but there is a free license that ships with GemStone. So when you download GemStone for free from our FTP site or our website, there's a key file in there that lets you get started as soon as you get it. And then this is designed to be kind of a stair step, so you can kind of pay what you afford to as your business hopefully grows and hopefully turns into Twitter or Facebook someday, and someday pays us a lot of money. Hasn't happened yet, but it's still good. Smallalk advocacy, we're continuing to do the things we always do, no change there. We're a member of STIC, we come to ESUG every year, we come to FAST in Argentina every year. We are members of the Faro Consortium, and we've got lots of open source projects going out there. It's just a few of them, but there's more. Metacello, Toad, two Greg Bale's going to talk about today. So, questions? Okay, thank you.